Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another How to Improve segment. This week, despite my post-combo breaker cold, we'll be looking at how to rewatch your matches and see what you can get out of them. Obviously, I'll have to ask you to excuse my voice, and I'll try to cough off stream. Or rather, mute mic while I'm coughing. Fortunately, there shouldn't be that much to talk about directly today. We're just going to enjoy watching some matches and see if we can get analysis out of it that isn't based primarily on I can't do this. These are all matches from a battle lounge with Santir, our Romanian Akuma, with the request that someone stronger show up. Setting that comment on your battle lounges is often a good way to get people who are more along the lines of trying to help you. So bear it in mind. They're likely to stick around longer. And if they leave, it's probably because they realize that even what they're doing can't actually help you that much. Of course, not everyone is like this, but it does increase your chances of good battles considerably. For example, in this case, we have a bronze Akuma, but with a gold Urian willing to fight them. I may pause and slow down certain parts of these, because obviously that is part of rewatching your matches. Use every tool available to you. And similarly, I'll turn on some key display stuff so that we can see more specifics if necessary. Now, it's obviously easy to tell yourself, oh, I should jump in less. But really, stopping yourself from doing things you like isn't a real way to improve at this game very much. Rather, given that your character has whatever tool, your aim should be to find when that tool should be used, and if you really, really like the tool, there's a good chance you also really like the situation in which it is useful. For example, in this case, it's not exactly that jumping is bad, but that one has to be a little bit more creative with the jump. So we can consider this the warm-up phase, where both players were getting used to each other. One of the primary things that we see that often holds back the sort of player that has come from older games is the amount of damage they need to maximize in this one. This is true for nearly all current fighting games. The Street Fighter 30th Edition Anniversary Collection, for example, is the opposite of that, but quite a few of those games also have some heavy damage optimization requirements as well. On the other hand, as we've said many times with Street Fighter, Dragon Ball Fighters, and Guilty Gear, The key is to learn your neutral first so that you understand which situations are likely to come up and therefore can focus yourself on practicing combos and damage optimization out of those situations first. There's nothing worse than learning a big combo and never being able to create the situation where it happens. Play and learn your neutral a bit so that you understand which combos you actually know how to do, which is usually none. But similarly, look for situations in which you hit the opponent but don't know how to convert it into bigger damage, and look for potential ways to do that. Now, as you can see, this Urian is quite good at a lot of similar things. They know how to turn little hits into relatively bigger damage. There is a certain level of calm required for this. Awareness is a large part of where the damage comes from in this game particularly. Rather than the combos themselves being specific or creative, the player's understanding of when they can convert and convert into what makes up a lot more of this. One example, as just shown, is that Sundir has over time become quite good at baiting people into getting hit by his medium kick Tatsu in neutral. Effectively, the capacity to use this as a whiff punish at the maximum spacing where it can hit, which makes it harder to punish. This is an organic thing that has come up just as a result of his style of play, but he could obviously stand to improve the damage he gets when this happens by doing the basic Aguma combo. When you've hit with that Tatsu, convert into Shoryuken to get more damage. As one becomes more and more aware of your meter, position on screen, and so on, you can learn increasingly better options for that conversion. For example, those who don't know, you can also cancel, or rather link, Akuma's medium kick Tatsu into his critical art, leading to a relatively large amount of damage if you're in the right position, off of just managing to hit with Tatsu in neutral. Here we see an immediate change and improvement. Jumping works better on this particular opponent when you throw the fireball. Urian's anti-airs are usually a little bit stressful, and he doesn't have a lot to have invincibility or go up, so this is a strong tactic against him. Demon Flip at particular ranges has the same effect. The key when you're trying to improve is to get better at things you like doing first, and increase the damage you can do from those things. For example, there. While you're unlikely to stand up to or beat gold players, the less interactions you need to bring their health down, the more you can generally get out of the match. Therefore, one of the first things you should be looking for when rewatching your matches is places where you probably could have done more damage if you had practiced a combo more. And this will in general be more useful than just looking up bread and butter combos or trying to master really powerful ones with very specific start conditions. Look for what you already tend to succeed at or situations that you create often enough to make it a good idea to practice those particular things. Some of these things are dependent enough on range that you may have better options than your standard at particular ranges. And if your standard happens to be the one that hits more often, it's good if that is your default. In Suntir's case, for example, crush counter, crouching heavy punch into standing heavy punch will hit at basically all ranges. Unfortunately, it is not as damaging as certain stuff Akuma can get. It's a good default to have though, because you don't have to try to identify or think about how far away you are. You could, however, learn the amount of times and spaces or situations where you do hit that crouch heavy punch crush counter from closer. Or even just the crouch heavy punch itself, honestly. Similarly, being able to convert in the case of that Tatsu could have increased the chances of winning the match or just given a better situation. We rewatch our matches to see what to prioritize in terms of increasing our damage or increasing our defense. Of course, we also watch it in order to find things that we don't understand and need to check with either the bots or in the lab. But in this case, honestly, this Urien has played very straightforward and hasn't really tried to do a lot of craziness or made life particularly difficult. Meaning that Suntir has a lot of opportunities to focus in the rewatch on things that he could improve just by doing that. One good thing, for example, there would be to see, was that too slow? Was that one out of range for some other reason? We know that there was an uppercut, and we're going to rewatch the last part of the second round for that reason. In fact, once again, let's turn on the inputs. Using this to guide your practice can be relatively inspiring, since the feeling that we need to practice in order to make things work can feel a little empty unless we can look back and say, this would absolutely have improved my situation outright. But watch, right here, Suntir has full super meter, and Urien's health is sort of low, and it looks like the uppercut was late, that's all. Meaning that had he been ready to convert from that Tatsu, Sekiya Koretsuha might have finished this round outright. Honestly, given that health, I'm not sure it would actually kill. There would have been some scaling. But it certainly would have brought one a lot closer. Meaning that just being able to say to yourself, if I practice using this, if I practice identifying when this is possible, and letting my natural flow lead me into the situation where I can use it, I can do more damage. And it's impossible to say that that's not technically getting better. You shouldn't ever let anyone tell you that the ability to just do more damage is not getting better at fighting games. The problem when people are telling you don't just learn combos is that they want you to understand that you really need to figure out how you're going to get to start hitting people with these combos in the first place. But if you already feel as if you understand your neutrals somewhat, and you are doing this sort of thing, you can use your matches to figure out which combos you already have chances to land. Now we're moving on to Bison, and Bison players are jerks. In general. And once again, because the Battle Lounge comment was seeking someone stronger than me, we have a gold Bison. Now, they aren't really trying to pick on Suntier in this match. They're not being a total jerk. But we can still see some signs of things that might work a little better if they were practiced a little differently. It's just that in this case, we're talking about defensive things. So let's look at some defensive things that matter in this matchup. Understanding that Bison's spacing often means that you don't get to put a lot of pressure on him. It's something you can learn just through like 1 or 2 Bison matches. You either have to react quite quickly, or be very patient, because as a whole, this character does not let you do what you want. Bison does what he wants because he's Bison. So understanding how to force Bison to make mistakes while on your defense is equally important. This actually applies to all characters, but Bison is useful to think about because he's so pressury, and you have to spend so much time watching what he does and identifying whether or not that pressure means anything. I.e., can I get out? Do I have any options at all? How long into this particular string do I have to wait before I can get out? And with the new updates to the frame data system in the game, plus the ability to use the frame-by-frame step through to measure ranges in a way that you probably couldn't do well enough in the match to remember, especially when you're not that experienced with the game yet, you can understand a lot more than you could ever have gotten by just playing the match. So we're going to spend some time watching through this particular match relatively slowly. And I'm even going to turn on some of the HUD stuff so that we can see frame data. For example, Akuma being able to start this with the red fireball seems like a good idea if you don't know Bison that well. The result here is getting hit by a Bison combo. Unfortunately, it didn't end up finished. But it did lead to being pushed out fairly far. And while Bison is not actually plus, at this point, you really don't get to hit any buttons anyway. Watch the pushback in this case. As a general rule, you don't really get to do anything about this. He's only -1 to begin with. So if he had been ready, that might have been whiff punished. I think it might have been. It was. This is probably a Bison setup outright. And hitting a heavy button in this case made it possible for the Bison player to set this up. This sort of setup is also similar and has a lot of characters who this works for. The player moves to the exact spacing where they know that if they do a certain sequence, you won't really be able to do anything. So watch carefully here. Bison is using a light scissor kick, which means he is -4. But if you look carefully at the range that Akuma is pushed to, he can't do anything. In fact, the Bison player's entire intention was to try to get his opponent to hit something short to try to punish it. Which wouldn't have worked, generally. It creates a situation where you get whiff punished for trying. However, Santeria does not necessarily know this, and this is part of the reason why certain setups don't work on lower level players, because they don't know that it's a setup, and because they don't know it's a setup, they hit stuff they quote-unquote shouldn't hit, and you lose. But the higher level player can usually adapt to this fairly quickly, unless they too have spent far too much time just setting up setups and expecting them to work. If they understand why their setups work, they'll just adapt them. So we see here that they have a lot of setups based on being at spaces where the opponent is likely to hurt themselves if they try a counterattack. And they have to get used to the idea that Santeria will hit something that they don't expect. But like most Bison players, they're watching that space very closely. But there you see, for example, and we'll go back one. This is a skill that many Bison players build up over time. They know exactly when to hit that button, so there's enough pushback that you can't do much. To the point where the amount of confidence it takes, belief in both your own game plan and your understanding of the game, to walk back, hit someone with a medium kick, and walk forward. In that situation has a strong implication. It means that they believed that they were going to not walk into a button, and they believed they were probably going to try to whiff punish it. Similarly, rather than try to go for anything after that crouch medium kick, they realized this is not an advantageous space for me, so I'm backing off. Santeria, on the other hand, could learn space that he can take up, and when to not bother trying to take up space. Another similar whiff punish. And I'm willing to bet they know this space as well. But that, for example, is not so easy for a Bison to get around. In fact, a high-level player in Santeria's position might have been willing to hit this sort of tatsu more often. In fact, especially in this situation, Because the worst they'll take after it, they've already lost a certain amount of health. This person has attempted to do that sort of frame trap at least 3 times already. Medium Keitatsu. And in this case, it would have been very rewarding had Suntir had more practice at either the Shoryuken or the conversion to critical art. That chance functionally still exists because if you realize the opponent keeps on doing this and you missed one conversion, there's going to be chances for more. Understanding what to watch for can help you quite a lot in these spaces. Similarly, our Bison player did that knowing that they were not going to get anti-air. That is not actually so easy to do. There are a certain amount of risks involved in doing that because you can be anti-aired out of it before, and reacting to the opponent's attempt to anti-air is iffy. Unfortunately, our Bison didn't stick around. And we had a Ken that joined, despite the seeking someone stronger than me comment. But do remember that when you see a player enter your lounge with 0 rank points, not usually like a smaller number like this one, but 0 rank points is often not an indicator that they're a beginner, especially if the level with the character is relatively high. Don't assume that anyone with 0 rank points is a beginner when they join your lounge, especially if you have something such as Seeking Stronger Than Me up. At least watch to see, because a lot of people don't like to bother playing ranked, but build up their skills another way. But most of us who can at least get through a couple will play to just see where we approximately stand. This match therefore became a matter of understanding how to defeat a lower level player. Lower level players use very simplistic strategies because that's how the game starts. That's how you begin to understand the game. And you can do them quite a lot of favors by showing them when their strategy does and doesn't work. In this case, we have the basic jump heavy kick into sweep. It's actually a fairly good strategy, especially if you tend to play against people that are around your same level. Don't need to understand any combos. You get the knockdown, so you get to play with certain timing, and so on. Similarly, Suntir can use this opportunity to test all sorts of different responses to that deep heavy kick to jump that Ken is using. It's possible to just use the standard anti-air, but you'd learn less. And in this case, we are able to look back at it and see this sort of thing happening. The advantage of knowing that your opponent is going to use a simplistic strategy is that you can spend more time focusing on how that strategy should be beaten. And, hopefully, to help yourself get past some of your preconceptions about how the game should be played or will be played. In this case, for example, our Ken player decided sweep is a good thing, sweep appears to be working, I'm going to keep hitting sweep. And while one would generally not assume that there's a lot of situations in which you would get to punish minimum range sweep from Ken, and therefore might not have worked on the combo, whatever the combo should be, this is a good reminder that understanding how to do it could lead to a large increase in effectiveness. Now I assure you that this Ken player does not stop doing mostly these things. So, let's take a look at some frame data. Which is another thing that you aim to learn from your matches now that the system can do this for you. Take advantage of this whenever you can. Anytime you have encountered something that you're not familiar with, just turn on the attack data, and unlike your training mode, where you can't slow it down, you absolutely can do so here. So we can see based on this that Ken sweep appears to be -12. Well, there are very few normals in this game that start up in 13 frames, which means you're basically free to hit anything you want. At this close range, therefore, you probably could just hit your biggest combo, whatever it is. It depends, of course, on your confidence in understanding how soon the move ended, how quickly you could get to the next button you needed to hit, and so on. But in this case, we can definitely start by saying, if you learned to respond to sweeps and learn which buttons you can use for it, you could get more damage. In this case, Santir uses the heavy punch target combo. However, unfortunately, this is only like 130 damage. It does not even remotely compare to the max damage that could have been done. So, while it's very likely to be able to win this sort of match off of just that, we can still pick up more information. For example, here, we see the sweep does happen, but now pushback has gotten into the mix. The sweep happens and is blocked, but the range is quite far out. In fact, you'll see something interesting weird happen here. The range is so far out that it's very little that can actually be done. Similarly, Ken is fairly plus after that heavy punch, but at the max range of the heavy punch, that doesn't mean you can do anything. It just means that you get to hit a button and Akuma doesn't. So you can learn over time where do I have to position myself that this is a good idea. But let's look at the sweep itself. The sweep makes contact, but for some reason, it's plus 11 to Santir at this point. So by watching this, you could just learn that sort of thing, just because you happen to be stepping through. For whatever reason, and it's a little difficult to explain this if you're not familiar with how this game works. But we will go with, for some reason, this move is now minus 11 instead of minus 12. Why did this happen? It has to do with the fact that either the first active frame of the move was not in range, or the even more complex thing where, because Santir was not crouching, because crouching widens your hurt box and therefore changes how you block, at the instant before this move was about to hit, it was going to whiff. And only by crouching did it cause the hit to happen. You generally shouldn't worry too much about this, but some people need to care. In any case, we now know that it could be that it is minus 11, and that means that if you had a 12 frame move, there is the small possibility of this being blocked. And you'd go, well, I was too slow, the game is weird, the game cheats me. I did it perfectly, because it would come out as a reversal and everything. You could easily find yourself in that confusing situation of, I just got a reversal on my 12 frame move against Ken Sweep and it didn't punish him. What happened? But frame data will help you understand this. So as of now, minus 11. And that wouldn't have hit anyway. So one learns, at max range of Ken Sweep, I can't actually do the punish I use for Ken Sweep normally. And while this is hard information to use in a match outright, it certainly can be less frustrating when you know that it works that way. So by rewatching, you're able to say, when I realize that Ken Sweep has hit me from really far, I should accept that I can't always punish it. Similarly, if one really did want to just win, if you felt that you had had bad luck with this, for example, and your opponent managed to take off too much health from you, even though they were using a very simple strategy, it's possible to continue to be confident because you probably have a lot of meter, and that means you can probably convert fairly heavily into big damage if you need it. Similarly here, in this case expecting him to go for throw, for example, instead of continually sweeping, or misunderstanding invincibility or something, led to continual use of light Shoryuken attempts on wake up and getting crush countered. But still easily able to catch it back because the opponent uses a simple strategy. They're going to keep doing the same thing. But here we have again the minimum range sweep. You see once again it is minus 12. Now the interesting thing about this is that you could think about this situation differently. Santerre releases crouch block in order to hit this heavy punch, but someone helping could tell him, well, you know that if you use the crouch heavy punch, you get a bigger combo, right? You could go from 134 damage to, I think, 262. And that is without meter. And recognizing I can do this because of this range is useful. Similarly, at this point, on this wake up, not only is this move +3, the pushback is strong, but not so strong that you have to worry about a whole lot. Your opponent has to try to walk back out of it, for example. One of the things that makes Akuma's pressure bearable and makes things difficult in the corner has to do with the pushback on that move. But if you're at minimum range in the first place, you do get to keep on hitting buttons after it. And your opponent doesn't get to hit any of their own. So another potential improvement is to realize, oh wait, I have a bigger combo from here. I might have to basically program myself to use it, spend an hour, maybe even more than that, making sure that my response to close range sweep is crouch heavy punch instead of stand heavy punch. But this is just flatly advantageous to you. There's another good example. Santerre knows that this player has been jumping quite a lot in this matchup, to the point where it's clear enough how to get this particular one done. They're quite far out. They have to hit really deep. There's no chance of the hitbox reaching before the parry will start, even if you're not that prepared. So, by spacing correctly, he could absolutely do a lot more with this. But the other part of this is comboable. This is comboable into like half of Akuma's moves. Therefore, any opponent that you can parry into the V-skill kick, you can also hurt more than that. This knowledge would allow us to say, you should be working on X. However, as we've seen, this situation hasn't actually come up that much. And I don't think it would have come up that much in other matches, such as against the Urian or the Bison. Against the Bison, it might have worked against the Devil Reverse, for example. But I think that hits multiple times, so... The point is that there are opponents who will definitely get caught in Akuma's parry into kick. And so much so that it will be obvious that you're probably going to get to do it. If you could then convert off that into big damage against that opponent, you would obviously increase your chances of winning the match. So, just from that small interaction, you could say to yourself, oh, I don't actually have any combos off of that V-skill kick. I should learn some so that I can basically do more damage, win more matches. Increase my strength stat, basically. And similarly, you could say, how often does that really come up? Rather than going to practice it immediately, you could similarly also just decide, alright, I'm going to see how often this comes up in my matches as a whole against people who are not this Ken. And see how many times I could improve my situation by using that particular thing. Similarly here with the Shoryukens. Recognizing that the opponent stands at this space, and therefore you could Shoryuken them more often than most players, helps quite a lot. Similarly, learning a more powerful crush counter combo would similarly help. There are a lot of opportunities to use meter, where if one learned the combos in the metered version, you could decide how important it is to you. And the great thing about crush counters in this game is, even beginners can recognize they have happened and put their effort into maximizing the damage they get off those situations. The same goes for that stun just now. Being able to look back at this match and recognize, oh, I've never actually learned another combo after those two heavy kicks. I wonder if there's something else that I could do more damage with. I wonder if I could just cancel into critical art. Would have changed that match from almost perfect to actually perfect. As you go through it, it's often helpful to make notes on things you could improve and the priority thereof. The 2MK team actually has like a whole bunch of spreadsheets for this, with little bits to just mark, do I know how to do this yet or not? So that you can quickly at a glance see what you should be practicing more. And you could sort it by importance to you. You could have something to tell you, this is important in this matchup, this is important in that matchup. This is a good reference for if you know you're going to be in a tournament or enter a battle lounge with multiple people and think to yourself, oh, do I know whether or not I have the capacity to beat this character? You're less likely to be frustrated if you look at your notes and go, oh, I didn't practice any of the things I need to beat this character. I know them, but I didn't actually get around to practicing them, so I couldn't mark it as something I understand how to do or can do consistently. Therefore, I shouldn't expect to have all that great a result in this match. Let's use this one as a little bit of inspiration as well. This is particularly true for characters who have parries or good normals for whiff punishing. Understanding which of your own block strings push you out to the point where your opponent wants to respond, but you can beat their response. 2 standing medium punches from Akuma push him fairly far out. But any opponent's attempt to do anything about it results in this parry happening. The good part of this is that at that range, it's also difficult to punish Akuma for doing the parry raw. He can just use it as an attack. They have to jump out of it, or any number of other small things. But Akuma just has the option to hit stand medium punch, parry punch, almost all the time, because the opponent cannot respond without being parried unless they have particular types of move for the purpose. And, most likely, even if they block it, he's not negative enough that they actually get to punish him from that range. This is not true for all characters, obviously, and you could similarly learn which characters are more likely to punish you for doing it. You could do it in matches and then rewatch them to figure out whether or not you misspaced yourself or misunderstood something about your opponent. All of these little things can come out of your rewatching in ways that will help you learn about your character and your opponent. Stuff you can take into either training mode, bot work, or just your next matches. For example, here we see full V-trigger at least is available. And Therefore, Sante will basically be able to go, I could respond to this and probably maximize the damage I do off this. It would therefore be worth it to go, I'm going to go and practice V cancels off my crouch or stand heavy punch, with the expectation of it helping. It certainly would have helped in this match. Being able to convert off that into an uppercut, for example, would also have helped. Recognizing that it can be done because the opponent jumped. There's a lot of little things you could add to notes to go, this is how I will do more damage. A full crush counter there would have been a much less scary experience because it would have killed. You can also use it for stuff like this, which is really helpful to people who don't have a clear idea of how good their own reactions are or their chances of doing certain things. Slow motion replays allow you to tell approximately how much time you had available to do particular things when most likely in the match you flinched and weren't sure. Being able to be confident will help you in matches later. You could identify in this particular instance that Ken and Akuma are going to land at about the same time. And Akuma will slide, and Ken will jump again. So let's watch here. What are the chances that Akuma could have done an uppercut and Ken not be able to do anything? According to this, it looks as if Akuma could have uppercut. It looks as if Akuma could have parried. In the heat of the moment, it would have been almost impossible to go, oh, I should do that right now. But if you look at the idea of what is happening, there's no way that had one been confident, you wouldn't have been able to identify this situation as a possible. The Akuma player, once they have entered this form of Demon Flip, can't do anything else. As long as they're watching Ken, they know that Ken has been in the air. It's easier to react to this jump than most jumps, because you don't have to worry about spacing anymore. You know where you're going to end up. You could have just gone, oh, okay, I'm going to uppercut. But for that to work, you would have to have at least some confidence that you had time to uppercut. There is an extra understanding of Street Fighter that helps with this though. Something that James Chen has taught many times. Why block if you can uppercut? This is only technically true for other games where everything is invincible, but for any given invincibility, this still stands. In other words, Ken is in the air. Ken is therefore doing an aerial attack. Akuma has an uppercut that is invincible to all air moves. If you had time to block, you had time to uppercut. Which brings us to why block when you can uppercut. Now again, this was a lot more about being able to recognize that there was enough time to uppercut, but if the recovery of the Demon Flip meant that Ken was going to hit anyway, you might as well. There's literally no reason not to attempt the uppercut. Except if you didn't trust your execution and felt, oh, well, I might mess up the uppercut itself. But if you practice them a lot, and you understand your Demon Flip, you could learn to uppercut out of Demon Flip at the end. You could practice that even though it seems hard. And given Santerre's style, for example, this comes up relatively often. The idea of doing a demon flip as a pursuit mechanism and the opponent response being to try for a jump because they think they can land it. It might be entirely possible to build up a whole style around getting people to jump and get uppercutted. Similarly, the ability to use Akuma's critical art cancelled off of his uppercut, even those, might be useful, because if you're expecting the opponent to hit extremely low, i.e. Akuma is literally in the first frames of the uppercut, Akuma is still on the ground at that moment, and as long as Akuma is on the ground, he can cancel the Shoryuken into the critical art. You can just imagine how much more spectacular it would have been to demon flip, have your opponent jump, and instantly uppercut into Sekigyo Retsuha, because you knew that was going to happen. For some players, it has been harder and harder to recognize incredibly hype moments or spectacular displays of skill by high-level players in this game. Partially because so much of the skills required for this game are about recognition, and when the viewer can't recognize why something was difficult, it's difficult for them to in turn appreciate it. But you can also therefore increase your appreciation of matches you watch in this way yourself. The more you learn to watch matches and think, oh, that was probably difficult, because you've seen enough situations in matches like this to judge that there wasn't a lot of time for it or it was otherwise difficult, the easier it is. Here's a perfect display of that. I'll go back one. You actually get to see the uppercut start. But unfortunately at this point Santerre doesn't have any meter to use it. Learning when to watch your own meter is equally important. This sort of match teaches you the most possible in rewatching only, because it is largely about repetitions of similar things. You're able to get more out of it by looking at small differences between those things. So far for this match, we have seen two interactions that could have done more damage. This interaction could have done more damage based on range. This interaction could have probably done more damage. I think this range would work for at least something. Once again, this interaction could have done more damage. And that parry was only slightly off, meaning that had it hit yet again, the situation would have occurred. Even this one, which is hard to actually see if you're not familiar with the game or familiar with the character, but we watch these things and we learn these things in order to become familiar with our characters. Let's look at this interaction based purely on how, say, Tokido would take it. Assume Tokido has started the red fireball, not knowing whether or not this will hit, maybe not expecting the jump or whatever. We see the fireball start up. Two things are potentially going to happen here. Either the fireball is going to hit, or he's going to get hit out of it basically before the fireball even starts. A high-level Akuma player is watching for the moment where one could cancel the red fireball into V-trigger. Why? Because the other situation makes no difference. The situation in which the red fireball is stopped means that that input will just be eaten. You don't have to worry about losing anything. So at this moment, most likely, cancel into V-trigger. Why? Because it would have harmed you nothing to at least try it. Canceling to V-trigger from here allows Akuma to do whatever he wants, quite honestly. You could go straight for uppercut. I think you could even get medium kick Tatsu into uppercut. You could go medium kick Tatsu into uppercut into critical art. I'm doubting that would kill, but it would certainly be more damage than this. Now that is still extremely high level tactics because there's all sorts of little pieces involved in that. But on the other hand, you could still put it down on your sheet. You could still put it down as, oh, I've thrown a red fireball and my opponent has jumped at me. Akuma takes a fairly long time to start the red fireball and you know that you hit it. If you built up the mental response that whenever your opponent jumps at you after you have started a red fireball, you are ready to V-cancel it, there's no downside to this. So while it is a very rare situation, it's that sort of rare situation that leads to high-level players optimizing their characters to that level. That is exactly the sort of thing that we look at Tokido and go, that was sick, that was hype, that was good. But it isn't necessarily that anyone else couldn't do that. It's that the amount of time it would take to practice it and become aware of it is just not something that everyone has the time to put in. We aren't all taught to do things like cancel red fireball into stuff when the opponent is jumping at us. But rewatching your matches leads to, oh wait, I wonder if I could have done this. And that is a very strong method of improvement in this game. Being able to question, could I have done this differently? Did I have enough time to do that? And use a frame-by-frame slow-motion replay to verify, at least to some level, whether or not the thing you wanted to do was possible, is one of the greatest accelerators in improvement of skill that is offered to us by modern fighting games. This is where our technology comes from. Curiosity and experimentation. But you need a basis for those things. Let's look at this one, for example. Is this another situation like that? Because if it is, it would definitely increase the chance where this is useful. But no, this one looks as if Ken is going to hit either way, because Ken was not jumping back, and the timing it took for them to get here is quite different, honestly. Ken jumped back far more early into this, so Akuma is still in the air when Ken jumps. And here's some recovery frames, and we can step through the recovery frames. However, once again, it would do no harm to Suntier to attempt the uppercut. In fact, Ken nearly didn't make it. He basically had 2 more frames. Had he been 2 frames slower on that jump, maybe 3, it would have been possible to uppercut. Once again leading to the situation of, you know what, I might as well practice this. I might as well practice uppercutting out of Demon Flip when I see my opponent jump. There's no loss to me in this, other than time, and the question of whether or not this is likely to come up in my matches often enough to make the time I invest into doing it worth it at all. Here's another interesting situation. And it wouldn't have come up before. This crouch heavy punch, when it hits, has less pushback. Not by a lot, but it has somewhat less pushback. But, for whatever reason, we see it get blocked here, the follow-up. That's not too ridiculous. If you look at how plus the heavy punch is, it'll make a lot of sense. So we're going to step through and see that. We know the heavy punch is going to hit because, again, Ken is minus 12. So in this case, Santir doesn't stand to do the heavy punch. He just does crouch heavy punch. And let's see what happens at the moment of contact. This says plus 8. Okay. That's a lot of options. But it's not an infinite number of options. In fact, we have to wait for Akuma to recover. He's still plus 8, obviously. And the next move that Santir attempts is his stand heavy punch. But his stand heavy punch apparently is more than 8 frames. So this combo doesn't work. This combo works when there's a crush counter, but not as a punish. Another important thing to add to your practice. The combo most often used from here is stand medium kick into a bunch of damage. And this is one of the most important Akuma combos to learn for the lower levels, precisely because this situation occurs often enough that you get to hit that minimum range crouch heavy punch. You probably need to know how to do big damage from it. You can flatly improve your performance by learning one combo. This is almost always true in the game. As you get better and better and your combos have slight differences in their optimizations, this shifts more toward playing neutral better or converting off of things better, understanding situations, knowing which combo works in which situation, and so on. But at the beginning when you're just learning, one of the best things you can do for yourself is learn the most damaging combo from this sort of situation. It's common, and you can just hit really hard. So, in Santir's case, we will obviously suggest, hey, you should learn the combo that comes from your crouch heavy punch. And because for most people, learning combos is just fun, and most of the situations in which you hit a minimum range crouch heavy punch, you knew you were going to be able to do the whole thing. You didn't have to hesitate or hit confirm or worry about it very much. It's relatively easy to just go, okay, good, I'll practice this. It's just going to do damage. I might as well learn to just do damage and have some fun that way. Many of our bots have this as the thing you are supposed to learn about them. But that brings us to the end of our fights with the Ken. And we will move into the situation I mentioned before. You see someone join the lounge with 0 LP, even though you said seeking someone stronger than me. Assume this person is stronger than you. Or at least that they think they're stronger than you. So we have a level 12 Urian. That's probably not that strong. For most people, it's not that big a deal. So let's see how strong this Urian is. Maybe they've practiced a lot of combos. Maybe they understand how to play the character really well. Maybe they just prefer battle launches. Any number of things. But we're not going to assume that 0 LP means they're going to do nonsense and not know what they're doing. What we have here, though, is the standard opening gambit double. And, again, a situation in which, if one were confident in being able to switch into an uppercut, I think heavy works here, and I think only heavy works here. You just get a little more damage. So far, it looks as if our Urian does have some decent idea of what they're doing. They have block strings, and Suntier, on the other side, has particular ways of doing things. For example, this was a counter hit pushback that led into the next move whiffing a little bit, I think. No, that's the interaction after this one. You can see here, for example, max range Tatsu. And max range Tatsu from Akuma behaves a little differently than other stuff. Now, you absolutely can punish that. Most 8-frame moves will definitely punish that. But if person is not comfortable with this attack, Akuma can get out of certain things. So they're jab whiffs, the second jab whiffs, because that's the main thing I was pointing out. The range you end up at when your opponent fails to punish such a Tatsu is relatively advantageous to Akuma. Here we see another useful trick. This move is +1, as is this one. But they create space. But look at the amount of space it creates. If you were familiar with this, or even obviously rewatching the match now, you could learn that this happens to be a problem for Urian. This sort of tiny interaction is very important for some people because this is a jump in light kick. It's not as if Urian jumped in very deep or anything. Akuma was stand blocking as he should have been. Akuma went to crouch block. And Urian was quite close. And yet, somehow, one light kick had a fair amount of pushback. And one light punch also had quite a lot of pushback. So you could use this and learn about Urian. For some reason, this crouch light kick into crouch light punch combo on Urian spaces him such that his crouch medium punch whiffs entirely, allowing you to whiff punish it. This is something you could easily commit to memory. It would also help you understand why Urian doesn't normally do this particular block string, and maybe allow you to go, oh well, I've seen this block string before, so I know what to do in this situation when you face a Urian who uses it a lot. Maybe they are somewhat a beginner and are using block strings from one of their other characters, which is often important. When people switch characters, they have to learn a lot about the new character, and they don't always have every option available to them. They use things they are familiar with from their other characters. And sometimes the behavior of those moves on the new character is nowhere near the same. But you see that this combo actually has a purpose. It does well when it hits. So there's a decent reason for this. The crouch light kick twice seems to have the same effect. Therefore, there's much less reason to fear the way this Urian plays if you know that you're going to be pushed out. It might even be in your best interest to not try that hard to anti-air them. If you're having difficulty anti-airing them and getting caught in it, just let them do the block string. It's not true pressure, it's not that strong. So, okay. The opponent has this good, strong reason to hit that light kick. Specifically that if you were not blocking low, you would get clipped by it, you would then get hit by the light punch, you would then get hit by the headbutt. So they have a reason for starting that with the light kick. But starting with the light kick also means that if you do block the whole thing, you are probably at advantage. Or at least the opponent has to use a certain amount of meter to do certain things, and so on. And even though this is relatively complex, you could still look at your notes, write down, you know what? Urian, who is trying to catch my legs when they jump in, also doesn't have a true block string. Or if they do have one, it's fairly easy to see because it's not confirmable. This may not even be true, but operating on that data until a Urian proves to you otherwise is still useful. So, this means that for our Sun tier, that becomes a thing. Being able to recognize, even instinctively, or because he's practiced so much with spacing and other things, understanding that counterpulse just help. So this is the reason, one of the reasons, why Akuma's standing medium kick counter poke is so good in this matchup. It pulls his hurt boxes back a little bit. Takes a while to start in that case, and as you can see, is really good at this. If one had faith that the counter poke was going to work, you could combo it into Tatsu. And from Tatsu, into uppercut. Your opponent would therefore suffer quite a lot from trying a block string that Akuma can counter poke out of. Allowing for a relatively large maximization of damage. And we actually see that this Urian does try to catch one's legs a lot. This is a common sort of thing for them. Their understanding of the spacing is a little bit off, in fact. Meaning there would have been a lot of chances for that combo. One could therefore say that in this particular match, had that combo been available as a whole, there would have been a chance for much more damage. Big opportunities could have appeared based purely on understanding this player is going to get hit by my stand medium kick based on stuff that they do. You don't even have to try to find your own timing to land it on them. They will create that situation for you. And therefore having that combo ready means you could go from, okay, this person is pressuring me a lot and I'm losing, to this person's pressuring me a lot, but as soon as they mess up, I'm going to hit them and do like half their life in damage, so it's okay. And that change in confidence, which comes from learning this type of combo, can drastically change how you feel about that sort of match, for example. Because you can say to yourself, I can beat this person. I'm not bad at this. I know what to do. It either just didn't come up in that particular interaction, or I dropped it. When the situation doesn't come up, it's usually because your opponent has done something more risky that you could have punished in some other way. But your comfort level is important. When you are able to comfortably say, okay, I know how to deal with you if you do this thing, and I'm just going to do that automatically. Muscle memory is going to handle that for me. I'm just going to see you do that combo and hit medium kick, and then you're going to take 400 damage without me even thinking about it. Then, once you've done that a few times, your opponent is obviously going to try to stop that from happening. And you, in turn, can focus your mental effort on deciphering their new approach. In other words, learning one combo allows you to spend more time in the match thinking about other situations and frees you up so that you could do more damage in other ways. Just get better at the game as a whole. Because being comfortable in matches is really important. However, let's look at that one a little bit. Does this only work on jump-ins? It could be entirely that this interaction doesn't work when Urine is doing it to you on your wake-up. Here's the pushback from the stand medium punch. And the crouch light kick. That looks like a fair amount of pushback still. And there's a crouch light punch, even more pushback. So, before we felt that the medium punch whiffed. Here, it seems to hit. However, we don't know that it would have hit if you had hit the medium kick. Could have been that the counter poke would have still worked. It could have been that at some point in that string, one just has to hold back a little bit and Akuma will drift back and it won't work anymore. All these tiny things pop up when you are observing enough to study them. And yet again, there's another chance for the conversion from the Tatsu into damage. And you'll note that once again, Santerre has full super meter at this point. Those could have been critical arts. As a generality, I just want you to imagine how much different the match would look. How much more advanced the match would look with the addition of basically 3 interactions. It's effectively saying you only need to practice 3 things to gain quite a lot of ground here. And you learn this by watching your matches and seeing which things to practice. Which situations have come up enough that you think to yourself, I should learn this combo. I should learn this reaction. I should learn to be ready for this thing. Here's another example. How plus is this? Plus 10. And a cursory knowledge of character frame data will tell you whether or not Akuma could hit his crouch heavy punch here. If he could, then the question becomes, is the range okay? How much pushback is there on this fireball? Let's look at that first. Interestingly, it doesn't seem to have that much pushback. It definitely looks as though the crouch heavy punch could have hit at minimum. But if we consider maybe the crouch heavy punch is not going to combo into anything from there. This early into the match, maybe you can't do anything with it because you can't V-cancel or whatever. That could potentially make this the better option. Anyway, for clarity, Akuma's crouch heavy punch is in fact 10. So it would have been tight, whereas this is 8 frames. And therefore much easier to do. It might be better to keep doing that. But again, we see a fairly strong push out. The counter poke attempt in case the opponent hits something. I'm pretty sure it would have worked in that case, for example. Knowing that they're at that range is helpful. And just happen to get them on the end with this. An uppercut is possible here. I'm pretty sure you can V-cancel the uppercut too. It would change that interaction from a clip with a medium Tatsu into corner carry, decent damage, possibly like demon flip stuff into whatever. There's a lot of options that come out of that. Probably not enough to win the match, but certainly enough to make your opponent regret just sticking out buttons in neutral. And being able to condition your opponent at all is useful. Similarly here, we've seen this jump in light kick before. We know what's probably coming after it. Are we going to get it? Yes, there's our light kick. Do we get the light punch as well, or another light kick? The thing is that another light kick is just about the same thing. I'm pretty sure that would have been counterpoked. Maybe not. But had it been another opportunity for medium kick Tatsu, uppercut, V-cancel, damage, because that's what Akuma does. Akuma punishes you for being an idiot. In fact, that is a large part of the reason why a lot of the previous fans of this character don't feel as comfortable with this incarnation of him. This Akuma is based a lot more on not so much being able to open you up, but making you make mistakes, and then when you make mistakes, really hurting you for it. As opposed to before where he was kind of like outright forcing the situation. You now have to get your opponent to want to fight back at all, and then beat them up for doing that. Rewatching matches in long sets can make it very clear to you what you have to work on. Because the longer a battle-round set goes on, the more often you get the same interactions repeating themselves. and the more clear data you about how much damage you could have gotten if you knew how to do X thing. X thing could be very difficult, it could be very small. But knowing that you can't do it, you're not failing to adapt to the opponent. You know what to do, but you can't execute it, or you don't have the reaction for it. You absolutely could benefit from going into training mode and just grinding on that. Especially since, as we've noted many times with bot style things, it's not specifically a whole lot less fun. When your opponents are playing with relatively simple strategies and you're not managing to counter them, bots might even be more interesting than that. Because you're just not getting to do what you want anymore. This match is basically at this point reached the state of I am practicing execution and blocking. Furthermore, these are useful for finding out things like this. Things you did potentially by accident or by instinct. Sometimes we're in the zone and we do incredible things, but that doesn't mean that we can reproduce them. Replays are really good for helping you with this. Did it need to be exactly this height? Was this spacing really measured? They slip right over the edges. As does Akuma slip right over the fireball. Learning the exact range at which this is possible is the sort of thing that top level players do in fact spend their time doing. They'll watch this replay over and over, and the fact that it's in grid helps even more. Okay, so he came up to me, he jumped back, the Aegis is still there. Bat dashed. Threw out a second Aegis, I got knocked back. And they're gonna measure exactly how far they had to be for this jump to work. For example, if Santerre had had meter at this point, in fact, I'm not even sure you couldn't have done it the other way, depending on how long the Goshoryu is invincible, the EX one. It might have been possible to just go through that Aegis Reflector and still hit Urien at this point. It's certainly not something you should spend a lot of time practicing, but when you are high level you can, and just being able to say that is helpful. Just being able to look at it and go, this is how this works. Similarly, let's look at this very, very tiny interaction. Urien jumped in with medium kick from fairly far. There was a little walk forward. And Akuma went for parry. Interestingly, for whatever reason, and this is true for many parries by the way, this makes his throw box move. So, the throw whiffs. This is actually useful information. You could learn, wait, my opponent has jumped from fairly far and I've blocked it. I'm not in any danger, really. Should I just parry? If you know that your opponent likes to close in and try to throw you after these situations, this is useful information to you. Especially since it's also that sort of interaction where your opponent's probably going to keep trying because they're not sure if they messed up something. You can really mess with people by just knowing how to do things that they don't expect and making their life miserable as a result. So just another thing to add to the sheet, add to the list. If my opponents are jumping from really far and clipping me with the edge of their button, and I block it, maybe I should just parry right away and see what happens. So, as the overall take from this, Sundir can improve in 3 particular combos, and the awareness of situations in which those combos can be done. And this takes like a day and a half for most people. If you're diligent about it, or not too good at the game, but if you're good at fighting games in general, this is like a day. And I mean good at execution, I don't mean good at understanding games even. But we're getting close to the end of stream, and of course also the end of the input, so let's move on to thinking about something else. Because when this opponent switched to Sakura, the dynamic changed quite a lot. It no longer was about being able to whiff punish things, or counter pokes. It was almost entirely about a particular pressure string, let's call it a pressure string, that every character deals with differently. Specifically, the one that is covered by our Kata 22. When you are under stress from your opponent doing the same thing over and over, but it's working, it can be hard to think of all your options, and it can be super hard to feel confident that any given option could work. So mostly here, we're looking for a very specific interaction. Namely, Sakura going into a particular block string, throwing a Hadouken, and then jumping. There's one, but that one doesn't cross up, so that's not the one we're talking about. It's useful, because you get the idea of what they want to do, but it's not the one I'm referring to. And of course, remember that lots of people use and need a lot of block strings to feel comfortable in this game. Learning to deal with them is almost entirely a matter of making sure that you rewatch some of it so that you know which ones you had to deal with. That situation, by the way, is another situation where if one has our Sakura bot, you've probably learned to punish this. It's not punishable by a crush counter things, because it doesn't crush counter. But in Akuma's case, his crouch heavy punch at medium range would still do all of the damage. And all of the combo. So once again, a situation where, we could just do more damage. But note the jump there. And this becomes a theme for this style of their Sakura play. With more practice, this Shoryuken would be dead. Is it worth the practice? Well, surely, because no opponent is perfect enough at this level to not open themselves up to your big damage combos, making comebacks a fairly strong thing. The game can feel as if you bounce back really easily, partially because of the difficulty of forcing your opponent to use meter to get out of pressure. And this is partially why that whole change to uppercuts needed to be a thing for certain characters. Even if you don't completely agree with which invincibilities were retained, there's definitely something to be said for the fact that you could use it without the meter, because Characters that didn't need to use meter and had easy confirms into super, i.e. Akuma and Ryu, and to some extent Ken, are basically just waiting for you to make one mistake toward the point of the match where they have enough meter to kill you and execute the kill. So let's watch the meter between these two characters for a little bit. Obviously, there's not much on either side at this point. But if you're keeping up with the block strings and understanding of the game, you know that by round 2, there will definitely be some meter in here. So we're starting to see that poke into jump cross-up thing. And unlike Kata 22, Kata 22 is meant to teach you how to deal with this, but it doesn't actually have Ryu do this. It's just useful because you do the same thing mentally. So poke into jump, and if you're not really prepared, you don't do that much about it. In fact, let's look at it again. A crouch medium punch from Sakura doesn't necessarily lead into too much. You're still blocking. But let's look at the amount of time this takes. Akuma takes so long to recover from this that he's absolutely going to get hit. But if you hit his shorter button, which is again what Kata 22 is meant to teach you to do, you might have recovered in time to get out of the way of this one. Or block. One of the first things you learn is to try not to whiff punish or poke people out at those ranges with your heavy buttons just because they reach the furthest. Primarily because when they jump, you end up in a lot of problems. But here we have the jump again. This time it doesn't cross up. And this time it might have been able to be blocked. But still. Now at this point, if you expect another jump, you have an option. But in this case, there is no other jump, fortunately. And there we go.
Sakura wins.
Once one has identified that the opponent tends to do this type of jump, after pokes and so on, you can either try to get the right counter poke to catch them on the way up, looking for a button that will also cover a lot of other things they do, or you can try to anti-air. But most of the time, this sort of thing is based around the idea that your opponent knows where you can't anti-air. It's fairly easy for people to build up over time a relatively strong repertoire of positions they know to use against certain characters to mess up their anti-airs. When you're in control, when you have a lot of time to hit buttons and experiment with where your opponent has good responses, pressure becomes a stronger tactic because people just try to hit random stuff to get out of it and fail. And when they hit the random stuff, they aren't the one learning the most, so it's kind of hard to make a lot of progress there without this sort of thing. Learning to rewatch the match will help with this for many reasons. So we have the jump from Sakura, and in this case a jump from Akuma. But it looks like Sakura's light kicked one out. So once again we're found this isn't necessarily the best thing. But we'll note that Akuma managed to move out of the way, but still get hit. When I did watch this match, the discussion we had was about forward dash. But there's absolutely enough time to forward dash here. In fact, there's so much time Now one was also able to use other things, but it's absolutely true that if you were worried about them hitting another button and you wanted to stop the other button, it wouldn't be immediately easy to forward dash. You would want to hit the button first and then do the forward dash. You don't want to just forward dash immediately. And you don't want to give them too much space. But let's assume that you were watching for the jump after the Hadouken. There was definitely enough time to Tatsu. And definitely enough time to forward dash. In fact, so much time to forward dash that Akuma might have been able to hit Sakura when she came back down. Because he does recover from that dash fairly fast. And we have again poke, poke into jump. And he had enough time to parry as well. The unfortunate thing about this parry is that again, the opponent understands that this situation is in their favor. They've switched it up so you can't actually anti-air them or counter them in any way. But you can absolutely forward dash. They keep on doing this. And this is where, therefore, it would be useful at least to have some Kata 22 practice. So, since this sort of thing actually comes up fairly often, the crouch medium punch or stand, there's a lot of block strings that people learn that they can follow jumps with that you're going to get crossed up or not be able to respond to. This is why we consider it so important to learn Kata 22 to that level. Because once you do, you can shut down a lot of those interactions and get to play more neutral. So, we can add that to the list. Giving us our first defensive improvement that can be made as a general thing. Something that you could say, I should devote a lot of time to this because it solves a lot of different problems. Now, while all of this maybe have been useful to specifically Akuma players, your goal should generally be to watch your matches and look for your weird interactions. Just rewatch them to see when your opponent was doing something you could probably have stopped and did it a lot but you didn't recognize it. And to see when you have the opportunity to do more damage so you know what combos to practice. Putting these things together will make really rapid jumps in your game while you are still below silver, and even into silver you can still get a lot out of it depending on what skills you used to get to the silver rank. So don't give up, even if your character's combos are harder or their situations to confirm out of are more complicated. Use your matches to understand those things and practice at least a little bit. It gives you something to do on training mode between matches, for example, even if you don't have anything else to do. Look at that list or that chart or that sheet and go, okay, I could benefit from just doing this combo a couple more times. This has been Rillian for 2MK. We're probably going to be hosting whatever is on Traveling Controller. So you can stick around for New England FGC action, assuming their stream is up tonight. Join us next week for, of course, more Mishmashing Battle Lounge on Monday, Guilty Gear Battle Lounge Tuesday Train, and probably some Sandbag Casuals or even more match review, more so from the commentary style side, on Wednesday. Next Thursday is likely to be Kame House lobbies. Hopefully they won't have any weirdness like last week. And for Friday, possibly more like this, as this has covered mostly the sort of thing that you get into when you're learning to watch your matches, and not gone very far into what happens when you are in relatively higher ranks and you're looking for very tiny interaction differences. Picking those out can be a bit harder. Even though I did a couple of them in this stream, you're more likely to see more of them when you are at higher levels of play. And knowing how to look for them can be really important to getting over your plateaus. That said, therefore, stick around if you want to watch some balance patch action, and otherwise, I hope your practice goes well. Good night, everyone.